Had a little listen to his podcast, huh?
Dude, it's educational. And besides, I've been wanting to listen to this one.
Welcome to Idling in the Impala, a podcast by and for lovers of supernatural and the fanfiction it inspires. I'm Carly.
I'm Sandra, and we did a dad episode, Battle of the Dads, and one of our favorite listeners wrote us a really long email with thoughts. And when we got it in our mailbox, I started reading it and I was like, no, I've got to wait. Told Carly about it. They were like, okay, I'll take a look. Carly came back and said, I have thoughts. And I was like, okay, well, let me see if it's okay with Miss Audubon is our listener. If I could read her email and then we could discuss or kind of either like embellish, talk a little bit more about where do we agree, where do we disagree. I just really love that we can have these conversations from many different perspectives, thousands of miles away, and talk about something that we all enjoy, but sometimes from very different angles. So if anyone hadn't already listened to the episode, it was Battle of the Dads. It was basically John versus Bobby, and all of the many reasons why John sucked. And so again, like, I think we did try to delve a little bit more into, you know, maybe the why behind what John did. But I feel like our listener, Miss Audubon, really kind of explored a lot of things too that we thought we'd like to share. So I'm really going to just kind of like pick apart, read through her email, and I think Carly, you're gonna like interject, hit the pause button or whatever, and we'll kind of like go from there. So I'm not sure how long this is going to take. It's quite a long email, and then
there's a follow-up email,
which we love. I love that. I love the enthusiasm.
Yes,
I've talked to Miss Audubon off and on for the past few months, and they've always have appreciated our episodes, our insights, and I think we're just, you know, fellow fans that love something, and we can extend that to somebody else who's maybe missing supernatural a bit too, as much as we are, and has something to discuss. So yeah, I guess Carly, unless you have anything to add before, I'll start reading and you just let me know.
No, I don't have anything to add. All I would say is don't ever feel bad, Miss Audubon, specifically to you. You're never going to bore us with your thoughts, babe. Email us all the time. We love it. It's really, like, it's fun. Sandra messaged me. She's like, we got an email. And I'm like, yay! We read them. Like, so specifically to you, but to anybody else. If you got thoughts about something, we tell you every episode anyway. Tell us your thoughts. Email us. Doesn't matter if it's like 2 words or, you know, War and Peace. We love it either way. Reach out to us. We're all here in the same fandom. Everyone's got a different view. Everyone's coming from their background. So it's good to hear those other sides. So don't feel bad about reaching out to us. But apart from that, no. I think you've maybe got a couple of paragraphs before I'm like, wait.
Okay.
So I think you're okay.
Yeah. So as I go about it, yeah, I think we've said like there's probably going to be edits in this or whatever, but we'll just read and see how it goes.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got, Dear Sandra and Carly, I have been wanting to write to you for a couple days now since I listened to your dad episode, but then I thought I better don't bore you with my thoughts.
Don't do that. Just send us the thoughts.
Yes.
We love it.
However, now after listening to your Winchester's episode, I just really felt compelled to write, especially as Sandra is addressing a few points that I was going to make. As I may have mentioned before, I am a social worker, and I have majored in youth and family services. Since I finished college, I have always been working. And I did, in addition, a 1-year internship in the U.S. during college, working in child and family therapy with some really troubled families. First off, I totally agree with both that John is an awful parent. He was neglecting and abusing his kids and really messed them up, especially Dean. I also believe that he damaged Dean and also Sam in their mental, social, and Dean's physical development.
Okay, wait there. I have definitely read this in a fic, and I had never thought of it until after I read it, but it ties in so perfectly to why the younger brother is 4 inches taller than the older, because Dean made sure Sam got the food.
Mm-hmm.
So Sam grew up properly, and Dean, maybe he would have been taller, maybe he would have been bigger, maybe he would have been bulkier, but he didn't get proper nutrition. I mean, you could argue
maybe
neither of
Dean
them
wouldn't
got
have
proper
gotten
nutrition.
bow legs.
Yeah, I imagine what is it that causes rickets? It's no rickets is a lack of vitamin D. I was thinking of scurvy. I was like, yeah, they probably didn't get much fruit and veg.
So maybe, I don't know. Maybe.
I don't like.
We're gonna put that in our head. I'm gonna put that in my head as maybe a possibility. But
Jensen's bow legs are 100% not caused by fucking rickets. The kid grew up in Texas. His body was probably like, will you stop giving us vitamin D? We have nothing to do with it now. Stop it. But yeah, maybe. In the context of canon, maybe if Dean had eaten a vegetable every once in a while. But yeah, no, that's it. I just wanted to point that out. That
was very inappropriate of me, and I'm so sorry, but I just couldn't help it. When you said physical development, I was like, bow legs. Dean has the sexiest pair of bow legs I've ever seen in my life. Because I was walking, Ted and I were at a totally off tangent. We were outside. We were at a car show, and this guy's walking in front of us, bow legs, and I was like, nope. Yeah, whatever he did with those, whatever happened genetically with those bow legs, those are just amazing bow legs. They just are. It's
because he's got a little bit of a swagger. Like he just swings his hips a little bit.
Yeah, but this guy was swaggering too, but it just wasn't working the same way. Wasn't.
There's a difference. There's a difference.
Mm-hmm.
There's a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a whole package. Anyway, I love his bow leg. So if lack of vitamin D is the cause, I'm here for it. Okay, back on track to the serious stuff.
We're moving back now.
Okay. Back then in the 80s and 90s, when all this took place in the story, and it was more normal to not helicopter kids like people think they should do in our days, to leave kids alone for some time, to give kids more freedom.
Okay, wait.
Okay.
Stop. Because I had a comment there and I was like, I'll wait until we get to the end of the sentence.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely agree that we're looking back on this with 2022 eyes.
Mm-hmm.
100%. We were looking back on it on 2005 eyes as well.
Right.
I am a child of the 90s, and before I would have been about 9 maybe, when my mum would go out for a couple of hours in the afternoon and leave me home alone. This was perfectly normal. Nobody bat an eyelid about it. When I went into high school, which in the UK is you're usually 11 when you go up. I think I was 10. No, I would have been 11. So yeah, you're around 11 when you grow up to high school in your first year in high school. And I was given a house key, and my school was a bus ride away, so it wasn't walkable. And I'd started getting buses on my own when I would have been about 10 maybe. And was just given a key and just told, just go home.
Yeah.
And this was, of course, the very late 90s, very early 2000s, no mobile phones. So no way to keep track of me, which was massively to my mother's detriment, because I used to just fuck off, not tell people where I was going. And I kept that up even after I had a phone. So yeah, I think that's just teenagers. But yeah, again, that was completely normal. Nobody batted an eyelid about that.
Yeah.
It was completely normal to leave your kids alone for a couple of hours. And it's funny, my eldest he'll be 11 in a couple of months. And in the last year, I've left him in the house on his own for like a couple of hours.
Yeah. A couple of hours is different from days and weeks.
Yeah.
That's a big difference. Yeah.
But the thing is, he's in my house with Wi-Fi and a fully charged phone and a landline if he needs me. He has ample ways to get in touch with me, and I'm like, oh, he's too young to be left on his own. He's only a baby. So I definitely agree. I try not to be helicopter mom, but I probably am. We definitely, pamper them.
Well,
a little bit more.
I think from that perspective, so growing up in the 80s, so I had a mom that was a very worrywart, very, very careful, didn't really let me, do a lot of stuff. But just because there was no way she could get around it, like she was a single mom, and she used to work in the house, and basically it was like she would babysit. And then that stopped at around age, I was maybe 10 or 11. And then it became, well, she's got to go outside of the house and find work. So when she found work at a restaurant, it was like, well, now you have to walk home by yourself, and here's the key. And when you get in, call me again, like, landlines, 85, this would have been. So, very much like by necessity having to do this. But yeah, I remember summers where, again, I wasn't allowed to do this, but I remember hanging out with friends, or like in the summertime, like kids were out all day. Like, and I would go and like maybe like meet friends like out in, like there was like a big old back parking lot with like a tree and like stuff that, we would all hang out, like do like a little clubhouse thing. But kids were out doing their thing like, all day, and it was just like, that was just the way it was. It was like, drink from the spigot, drink the water out of the hose, and, not worry about like this or that, or, be on your bikes all day, and parents not wanting their kids to come back until it was like sunset.
Yeah.
Where I think we're in a different culture now with that. And again, not necessarily that any of it's bad. It's just very different. It's just a very different mindset. I find it interesting that the kids that grew up that way tend to be the ones that helicopter now. Or I think there's even a term called lawn mowing or something, like lawnmower parents or something. I can't remember, but there's a couple different terms.
Yeah, there is.
So it's interesting that, did some people just really not think that was, the best way for them to grow up? And they're like, I'm going to do this completely different. This was like, I was being ignored or neglected, or, I didn't, where I just think it's a time we never will get back because of all the difference too. Like you said, now you're so connected to your child. There might be a little bit more of an ease, or you're still going to worry, but there's that, well, I can immediately get in touch with them if I need to. Where with my mom, it was like I'd have to call her work, and I'd have to like ask to speak to my mom, and I'd say, Mom, I'm home. And, she's like, okay, you got homework to do. Yep. And, do all that stuff. So she was still a helicopter parent, but in a different decade. You know what I mean? Like, so it's kind of like you kind of can place them in different times, and it's still, that type of parenting is still there. It's just the way it was done based off of the parameters that you had to work with, kind of thing,
I think a big part of it now is because, like, I had a bit of a unique situation in that where I went to school, even before I went to high school, was not where I lived. I went to school near my grandparents. So, and my grandparents were like, no, you may not have friends over. No, you may not go play out with your friends. When I was in like primary school, it was like middle school for you guys. So when I was where my school friends were, I wasn't allowed to play with them. And then when I was home, I didn't have friends there because I didn't go to school with anybody there. So I didn't have the joy, the experience of like fucking off on my bike all day. But certainly I could say to my mom, I'm going out, I'm going to go play. And there would be no questions asked about where I was going or who I was going to be with or what time I was going to be back, anything like that.
Yeah.
It was just, I remember not being allowed to play in the front garden until I was like maybe 10.
Okay.
I don't know why. It wasn't like we lived on a busy street or a bus route or anything. But that was one of the rules. Like you couldn't play in the front garden or like play on the street. But I think a lot of it comes down to kids have more stuff now. Every kid is walking around with a phone in their back pocket. kids are walking around with like designer trainers or designer clothes and things like that. Things that maybe weren't as prevalent when we were children.
Mm-hmm.
So from a parenting perspective now, I'm kind of like I try to be like not hands off, but I try to sit on my hands a little bit and be like, you can go play. You just let me know where you're gonna be.
Yeah.
And he takes his phone and I like as long as I know roughly where he's gonna be,
Yeah.
it's okay. But there's that fear. I'm like, he's got a phone in his pocket. You know, someone could beat him up
Mm-hmm.
for that phone. And as they get older and they've got like smartwatches or they've got that pair of Nike trainers or whatever it is, I think that's what prompts more of the fear in that generation as parents now,
Yeah.
because they can be walking around with hundreds and hundreds of pounds worth of stuff on them.
Mm-hmm.
And all it takes is one person to decide that they want what your kid has,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And I definitely think that plays into it. Because kids don't know. They don't think about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Like I bought my kid, I had to buy him a phone. He started walking home from school and it's about a mile. And I was like, well, he has to have a phone and he has to have a way to get in touch with me. But I didn't go out and buy him like a top of the line, you know, iPhone or something like that. But it's still a smartphone, but it's like low end.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was like, there's every chance he's going to break this or
Yeah.
lose it or anything like that. And I'm not laying down thousands on a phone that I might have to replace in a
Mm-hmm.
couple of months. And fair play to my child, he has looked after that phone. He's lost it one time. And he called me up in tears. And he was like, my sister, Mama said my
Aw.
phone's falling out of my pocket. And we found it,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So I think that probably does play into it.
Yeah.
Just that they have so much more worth on their person, so much more wealth
Mm-hmm.
just on their person that you think, oh no, somebody's gonna
Yeah.
beat him up and take it.
Yeah.
And that just wasn't a thing in the 80s and 90s, was it?
Mm-mm.
You know?
No. And the one thing that we keep the word that we keep saying over and over again that I'm noticing in our talks about, like, you know, how kids were let out to play. That's not something that Sam and Dean ever had in all of this, you know,
Yeah.
time period. There was never a, oh, you know, well, you're doing, you know, we're gonna just leave you be or do whatever, you know, just go play. So I think that's just something to keep in mind too. I think in that standpoint. Yeah. No.
Oh no, I'm sad now. Because that's right, isn't it? They never
Yeah.
stayed anywhere long enough to make friends.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And every minute that they had, John was finding something for them to do.
Mm-hmm.
They never just got to just be kids.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
I
So
made
now that I've
myself
saddened
sad.
you.
I made myself sad.
Okay. So let's see where we're at. Okay. From a pedagogical standpoint, giving kids more freedom and independence actually does have some good to it. And I work very hard in my city to provide circumstances that allow that. For example, it was normal to not get a babysitter for everything from when I was 6 and my brother 3. Sometimes when my dad had to do conferences at night and my mom had meetings with her club, they would put us to bed and leave. It was normal. Many parents did that.
Okay, wait.
Not that young that I know of, at least here. Again, maybe it's a cultural thing.
Yeah, I think that's a cultural thing because that was not done
Mm-hmm.
where I was.
Mm-hmm.
If my mum had to go out on an evening, I would be taken to a babysitter.
Yeah.
A babysitter would turn up. Certainly not at 6 and 3.
I feel like what would have been okay, not that my mom would have ever done it, but I feel like maybe like when I was 13, then it would have been like an okay time to, like, you know, I could be left, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
for like, say, a late night where they might not come back. Like that would be an age I feel that would be considered, you know, fine or whatever. Even back then, my time, I feel like that would have worked.
But like I said, I think, like you said, though, I think that's just a cultural difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, obviously Miss Audubon is not in the UK, They are not in the USA either.
Yeah.
So I'm sure the astute among you will have guessed from the name where they are from.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I can't speak to certainly that culture because it's not something I've experienced. But no, I just want to point out, like, that's one country's experience. That's not a universal experience. Certainly not that young.
Yeah. Yeah. She goes on, we even have a word in Germany for the kids that used to spend all their afternoons after school alone at home while the parents had to work. Our school usually was over by 1:00 and there was no childcare. So single parents or parents that both worked had to give a key to the kids and they reheated themselves something for lunch and stayed home alone. We called those kids Schulkinder. I'm just guessing. My husband was one of them, and for him, it was okay and normal. And Carly,
I translated
mention,
that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I translated that, and it means exactly what we called it in the UK, which is latchkey kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Latchkey children.
Yeah.
So put the door on the latch, and your kid opens it and comes home. And in the UK, schools cut out around 3. So you wouldn't be doing lunch. But by the time I would get home from school, it would only be like an hour, maybe an hour and a half. And then my mum would be home. And certainly, because this happened when I was in high school, it was not uncommon. I would say more days than not, I would get home to a note on the counter that just said, hey, will you prep this for dinner? Will you do this? Something's in the slow cooker. Will you turn it off at such and such time? Or will you turn this on? She would prep whatever she needed to prep before she went to work and ask me to do the last minute bits before she got home. So yeah, that's cute that it's the same word though. Latchkey kids. What would you have called it?
Oh, same thing. I
latchkey kids as well.
Yeah, latchkey. That's what I remember. If there's something else, I can't think of it right now, but I just always remember hearing latchkey.
And it's not something, I don't know about you, but it's not something you identified with as a child, because latchkey kids have been popular, but not popular, but they've been around forever. Like my mum was born in 62 and she was a latchkey kid. Both her parents worked and she would get home with her little sister and they would have jobs to do and they would have food to prep and things like that. And it was a known phrase when I was growing up, but I was never like, yes, I'm a latchkey kid until I grew up, and then I was like, oh yeah, no, I was.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so then she's got but in all caps. Even for this era, what John did was totally neglecting and really, really messed up. So I agree with you there. Jensen and Jeffrey Dean Morgan, I'm assuming, did an interview on the Supernatural Then and Now podcast. And they talked about how they both were surprised that the fans hated John so much because they played it from the view that John did things wrong, but truly loved the boys and wanted to protect them.
I love the way you paused. Like, there's a note there. Okay, so this, I don't listen to the Then and Now podcast. I think because when it came out, I was kind of moody about anything to do with Supernatural. I might have still
aside from what we were doing.
Yeah, I don't know. I saw it and I was like, no. I don't know why. I don't think I was in a great place. But the fact that Jensen and Jeff were surprised Pikachu face, like, oh, the fans hate John. Fucking really? 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 Okay, so later on in this email, which we'll get to, our reader addresses some things around Sam and what John knew about what had happened to Sam. And they speculate that John obviously knew what the demon had done to Sam, knew that the demons would be looking for Sam. And so that is why he took a lot of the actions that he took. So the fact that Jensen and Jeff were surprised, I'm like, so if we take that as canon that John knew, and why I think by the time Sam was 19, I think we can assume that yes, he did know.
Oh yeah,
what was happening, and he still was like, if you leave, don't come back. To your 19-year-old kid, And honestly, it was nothing but a temper tantrum on John's part there because Sam wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just not following the path that John had expected for him.
Yeah.
And so John had a temper tantrum. And I'm like, I don't feel like you get to portray a character like that and then be shocked Pikachu face when the fans turn around and go, well, they can die in a fire. You know?
Yeah.
So just that's funny to me. That's funny to me that John and Jeff and Jensen were like, oh no, we don't know why. Why do the fans hate John? He loved his children. He may well have loved his children. That does not change a goddamn thing. If you love, I don't think for a second that John didn't love his children. He just, well, we'll get into it. We will get into it. But the actions that he took are not the actions of a man who loves his children. That's, you know?
Yeah.
And he probably did in his own way and blah, 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 blah. And he wanted the best for them. And
I think it's just getting lost along the way, right? Like in terms of his love for his kids, I think was always overshadowed by having to find out what happened to Mary and the revenge aspect of it. And again, I find it very interesting that he butted heads so much with Sam, where I think Sam is very much, maybe very similar to him in drive and goal. Like when it came to, I mean, they did and I don't know how much more of a blatant parallel you can get to have both women up on the ceiling and burning, and then they're both trying to find out what happened. And it just, that revenge part of it, I think just always maybe got him lost. The love was there, but it got buried or covered up by this other need that I think clouded his better judgment many, many times over and over again, as what a parent should do. That's my thought anyway from it. And I think it's very similar to yours, Carly. And especially like, no matter when he knew, you would want to protect that kid. You would want to tell them, if that was the moment where he had to be honest with Sam, that was the moment he could have been honest with Sam. I need you to stay. This is why. Not go out on your own and we're just going to hope for the best. That does not. Yeah, I can't reconcile that anger for that over superseding, just letting him go, especially, and then letting him go without a lot of tools. Like, he didn't really have a lot of experiences outside of the John, Sam, Dean, and I'm sure he wanted them, but not this way, not without the knowledge. That's what we kept coming back to, I think, too, when we were talking about John versus Bobby. It was not giving them the tools that they needed. Because then at that point, if you tell him and he still wants to go,
at least he's fully appraised of the situation. At least you've given him everything.
Yeah.
You can be sad about your kid leaving college. You can. That's fine. It happens all over the world every day. Kids leave for college, for university, whatever, and parents are sad about it. You can be sad. But what most parents do is they equip their child with everything that we can think of for them to succeed. So let's take this particular example. But I'm going to Stanford. Okay. Kind of wish you'd have told me about this earlier, but fine. And you give him a weapon, you make sure he knows how to deal with the most common things that he might encounter. Does he have a silver knife? Does he have the materials? Can he source the materials to make salt rounds? Does he have, or can he get what he needs to protect himself? And then once you've done that, in much the same way a normal parent would, buy furniture or whatever, like teach their kid to cook or, any manner of things. You just prepare them the best that you can for whatever they might face. and you'd be like, I'm at the end of the phone if you need me. And
Yeah.
you don't just have a big ass temper tantrum and go, if you leave, don't come back. Meh, 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 meh.
And it wasn't
Fucking hate
discussed,
John
and I
Winchester.
don't know, like, again, like, it would make sense, like, maybe if he had done it, but like, was Bobby still somebody that Sam could reach out to during that time? Like, they don't really talk about that. Like,
No, he wasn't.
he didn't
No,
talk
he
to
wasn't.
John, and he didn't talk to Dean, or I think he might have kept up with Dean, but very, very rarely, if at all. So he had no other
Yeah, nobody for
outlet.
help.
Yeah. So that's, to me, that's like, even if you're going to, like, I would imagine some parents would be like, okay, well, I have some people that I know that can at least touch base with him and give me an update through another person. I don't think he had that at all, or I don't even know if he tried to do that with Sam. So yeah, there's just a lot of questions about that for somebody who was so about protect Sam, protect Sam, protect Sam, and then okay, just go.
Yeah.
Like, what
And
was the final straw? Like, what was that? Like, was he just thinking, well, there's no other way I can stop him from going down this path that I've been trying to keep him from doing? Like, that doesn't make sense either. So I don't know.
yeah, and I mean, we're looking at the practical things emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
We saw Jared's fantastic acting season 1. We saw what that final fight did to Sam
Mm-hmm.
because they hash it out again.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
how, if you think of the emotional aspect, uh, I didn't go to university, which is the UK equivalent of an American college, so I don't know like what the application process or anything like that is like. But from what I hear, it's quite stressful. Stanford's quite a prestigious school as well.
Mm-hmm.
So how difficult must that have been for Sam to keep all that secret and not
Mm-hmm.
have anybody to even talk it through? Like, hey, can you look at this? Do you have to write like an essay or a letter or a
Oh, I
something?
mean, there's a ton of
maybe?
stuff, and then you've got to like apply for grants, scholarships, like all these different things. Like, he couldn't
Yeah.
afford it, so how did he? That's those student loan things are horrendous. Or even if you want to try to get a grant, it's not.
I think Sam got a full ride.
Mm.
I think he got a full
Which is pretty
ride.
impressive for somebody who was not steady in school. Like, that's another, like, okay.
Yeah.
So again,
Yeah.
it's
So
a
it's
lot of
just
what was he doing on his own at such a young age too, and how much was he, I don't know, given the feeling that he could do that, probably a lot of it by Dean, whether or not Dean wanted him to go, like, how much did Dean know about what he was doing, that kind of stuff. So yeah.
I've read a lot of fanfics that cover that.
Mm-hmm.
And most of them detail Dean, taking Sam to the bus stop or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
giving him some money, and kind of not fighting Sam and just
Mm-hmm.
being like, be safe,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of them have conversations around, come with me, I can't stay, I
Mm-hmm.
can, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I would like to think that would be how it went. I think Dean would have supported as much as he can, but I don't think Sam told anybody
Mm-hmm.
what he was doing. And how fucking sad is that?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hate John Winchester so much. I hate it. Okay.
We'll go back to that.
Yeah, moving on.
Keeping this and my professional knowledge and some personal experience in mind, I do have some explanations on how I understand why John acted the way he did. It doesn't make it right, but I think it may make a little sense. At least it does for me, and that way the storyline makes sense for me. Over the years, I have seen many parents that truly love their kids, but are terrible parents because of their own shortcomings. And in the supernatural storyline, there are a few things that would make John a saint or very special person if he was a great parent. I hope I can explain my thoughts in a way that makes sense to you. Please excuse if it sounds weird. While my everyday English is okay, I am not used to speaking about these professional things in English. It's still a foreign language for me, doing a great job as is. So I believe John was traumatized from the war. There is no way a person goes to a war as bloody as the Vietnam War without being at least a little traumatized. From
Okay,
what
stop there.
yeah.
Stop. So it's probably worth inserting at this point. I'm only looking at this from the perspective of Supernatural. I'm not taking into account John Winchester's character from the Winchesters. I don't know if you're doing the same, Sandra, but that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Basically, because we know that everything in the Winchesters is not canon anyway. And it's all, it's all going to get muddled up somewhere along the line. So I am only looking at this from the point of view of the Supernatural story. So I totally agree. He was a Marine. He was in the Vietnam War. It was a horrible, bloody war. Yeah. 100% traumatized. I wanted to draw attention to that because there are scenes in the first episodes of the Winchesters with John having flashbacks to the war. And I'm just discounting that completely. But I'm sure John's stories from Vietnam would be very similar to a lot of Vietnam veterans. It was horrible. I mean, no war's great, but, So, yeah, I totally agree. Traumatized from the war. Yep.
From what I saw in the story, my diagnosis would be PTSD and some mild depression, probably with beginning alcoholism before Mary died. They say in the series that John did not always come home at night to Mary and that they had fights. I interpret it that he had PTSD problems and went drinking to a bar, not being able to talk about it with her.
Also, 100% agree. And I know I'm looking at this with 2022 eyes going, we need therapy, Winchesters. But again, in the late 70s and the early 80s, it just wasn't accessible. Our reader goes on to say very much the same, that it just wasn't, mental health support wasn't accessible.
Yeah.
And from my very, very basic understanding of the Vietnam War is that the soldiers were told that they were going to come back to, be lauded as heroes. And then what actually happened was that everybody was just disgusted with them. So that
just wanted to forget, right? Like it's this common mentality that we have as a culture, society in general. Something bad, let's just pretend, let's just not talk about it. Let's just not talk about it. Like we don't want to talk about it. It's over, it's done. Let's move on. And then you've got the people that are dealing with, no, I went through this. This is a thing that I need to talk about. And there's no outlet for that. That's it's just so upsetting that we don't learn, or if we do, it takes us a really long time to understand that people need support in a variety of different ways when they go through something traumatic, especially when they make a sacrifice for the whole. Like for the good of the whole, they've made sacrifices. And we just want to say, well, it's over now. Great. Thanks. We're not going to worry about how that's going to affect you for the rest of your life. We're on the other side of it, whether or not you are. That just bothers me.
Slightly like tangentially from that, there was a TV show in the UK called SAS Who Dares Wins. And it was basically some former I don't think any of them were in the actual SAS. No, I think one of them was. A couple of them were in the special boat service. But that kind of I can't think of the word. Highly specialized kind of soldier.
Like a Navy SEAL or something like that, like what we have over here. Yeah.
Yeah. It was very specialized. And there were 4 of them. And they've all written books. And one of them is a cunt. Just Google Ant Middleton, guys. Man's a wanker. He's about like 5'2" and has every single issue that comes along with that as well. But they all wrote books about their experiences, which seems to be par for the course. And I've read, there's only one of them I haven't read. But of the 3 I have read, 2 of them left the military because of mental health. And the military did not offer them support. They were just like, well, sucks a suck, doesn't it? Off you go.
Mm-hmm.
And both of them, really had breakdowns in civilian life and had to access treatment and things like that. And we're talking about soldiers that were in the Iraq war in the early 2000s. So we're not talking that long ago.
Yeah.
And still, the military is not providing these people with proper support.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's still that bad now in the
Mm-hmm.
21st century, God, how bad would it have been in the 70s when John
Yeah.
came back from Vietnam,
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, I just wanted to draw attention to the fact that actually it's still like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And
there's
yeah.
there's certainly mental health services are much more accessible now than they've ever been.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still I don't know what it's like in the USA, but over here there seems to be like a scale of you're not mad enough to need help at the
Mm-hmm.
bottom. You're too mad, we can't help you. And then in the middle, you're the right amount of mad, we'll put you on a waiting list for 18 months.
Yeah, it's pretty, yeah, and it's awful here. It's awful here. It's pretty much the same way for our vets and stuff. They're always forgotten. And there was like a recent bill that needed to get passed that comedian Jon Stewart, made a big to do about it because again it became very politicized and stuff. And the vets were going to be the ones that were going to suffer if it didn't, they weren't going to be able to get all that health care that they needed, whether it was, healthcare for the body or healthcare for the mind. It was just going to be another impediment, another block to get people the help that they needed. And it did get passed. But again, it was such a struggle. And it's all about it. You lose sight of what's really important in the grand scheme of things with that. So, yeah.
I was reading, not in relation to military veterans, but I was reading a autobiography of a police officer that was worked at the site of the Twin Towers after the attack. And I've read a lot of firefighter accounts who were obviously there for the collapse and things like that. But this particular one, he wasn't even in New York at the time. He was a police officer. He was in New Mexico. He heard about the towers falling and hauled ass back to New York. And he worked around the site, but not specifically in the site. And then he went to Fresh Kills landfill, where they took all the debris from the site to be sorted through. Can they find any remains? Can they find any personal effects? Things like that. And his story was basically, what had happened at the thing and, going to the landfill and how he had progressively got sicker and sicker and sicker because of his exposure to all of the
toxins and everything. Yeah.
Garbage that came when the towers fell, and going back to court again and again and again to seek, I think it was like permanent disability under a bill that was for people affected with health issues post 9/11, and it being refused again and again and again. And he wasn't disabled enough, and even though there's categoric proof that all of his health conditions were linked to his exposure, they're saying no, it's not, and da. And he passed away in 2014, having never got those benefits that were promised. And towards the end of the book, he's stayed in touch with people. He moved away from New York and things like that, but like stayed in touch, and it was just one person after another person after another person passing away, never having been able to access the help that they needed to get the care that they needed.
Yeah, that sounds like, so I was just looking this up. It's an article from The Guardian about the PACT Act, the bill that passed in the Senate, provides assistance to veterans who were exposed to harmful chemicals during their service. such as Agent Orange during the Vietnam War or toxins from pits used to burn
Yeah,
military
burn
waste in
pits.
Iraq and Afghanistan. And it says currently veterans have had to prove that illnesses were connected to their service, and the Department of Veterans Affairs did not consider exposure to toxins a service-related condition. The department has denied about 75% of veterans' burn pit claims. So this PACT Act basically gives them more opportunities to actually get the help that they need for those kinds of issues that are occurring with them. Biggest expansion of veteran affairs healthcare in decades. We'll see how much it actually helps, or when it actually, I don't even know like when all that stuff, like how long that stuff takes to even like go into effect and everything, but it's at least another step forward. But again, that's just another layer of making sure people get the help that they need, and not constantly denying or saying, well, no, because of this or because of this. Like, just stop. Just help the people that have done so much for the country.
Yeah. I just looked up the if anybody listening did actually want to look or read that policeman's account, it's called Delay, Deny, Hope They Die by William Dement. And it was published quite a few years ago. It was published before his death in 2012. And as I say, he passed away in 2014. So yeah, just if you want to just be mad at either your government or the USA government, feel free.
Yeah, plenty of
but
reasons.
Yeah. So it's like massive tangent there, but like all that to say, John would not have been given the help that he needed when he came home.
Yeah. And
all that to say.
Miss Audubon goes on to has a personal story about a relative who suffered from severe PTSD after World War II. And then really kind of parlays that into back then, they didn't adequately treat people for these mental diseases. They told the soldiers and their wives to suck it up. Instead of therapy, they would tell them to get a drink and get over it. They also did not talk about the PTSD, and men especially did not talk about being depressed. That was a woman's disease. Also, John probably had some kind of anxiety disorder after the war. Now, the thing with trauma is, and she goes on to say, I had to do some special training on that because in my work, our CPS department deals with many kids with PTSD, that it actually changes your brain. Trauma will set free certain chemicals in your brain that give you a fight or flight or freeze response or a dissociative response. It will trigger some really strong feelings, often related with terrible fear and anxiety. Actually having a dad that used to love you and suddenly doesn't show up anymore without any explanation. This is a real trauma for a child as well. Now, when people
completely, sorry,
that's okay.
Yeah, completely agree with all that. I don't have anything to argue or contest with that. That's as someone who deals with trauma on a daily basis. Yep, that's very true. I wish my fight, flight, or freeze response was less geared towards fight. But that's the way my brain goes.
Yeah, I think mine's freeze. I think I freeze a lot. I don't know if I fight or flight. I think it's more freeze.
Oh no, I will.
I'm dealing with it.
Occasionally I will freeze, but more often than not, I'm liable to try and take control of the situation. So if I'm triggered by like something on the TV, I'd be like, we need to turn this off. And that'll be like my one shot of being reasonable. If I get any pushback from that, even if it's just, but why? I will just fucking haul off on whoever.
Okay.
And I will really go because my brain is just like, no, we need to make it stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I wish it wasn't quite so fighty. But all that, yeah, completely agree.
Now, when people experience trauma that they cannot get over and don't get adequate help to deal with the trauma, that's when people get PTSD. PTSD means that a certain area in the brain gets triggered again and again, and those chemicals that are in your brain during the trauma are there again as if you were back in the traumatic situation. And it also truly feels like you were right there in the situation. The more this chemical situation in the brain is triggered, the more those chemicals are normally in your brain. And this then can cause other long-term conditions in which the chemicals in the brain are out of balance, like depression and anxiety disorder. This can just happen from something in everyday life, like a noise or a smell that reminds the person of the traumatic event. However, if something really traumatic happens, like seeing your wife burning on the ceiling, that will completely bring up all the trauma and really hit the PTSD home. Also, the feeling of being constantly in danger, whether the threat is real or not, will put your brain in this PTSD state, constantly with the chemicals on high alert danger status. And I believe that the more he found out, the more John believed he and his boys were in danger. So, from my point of view, John should never have been alone with the boys after Mary died. He needed help from the get-go. He was just totally re-traumatized, severely depressed, and the one person that had helped him get over the war and lead a kind of normal life was gone. The story also says that John went to Missouri when the boys were little. I understood it in a way that John found out that the demons were trying to mess with the nursery, and that quite early, he must have had the suspicion that the demons wanted to get their hands on Sam, because it all started in his nursery. Mary wasn't even supposed to be there. So my interpretation of the situation during Sam and Dean's childhood is the following. First, John wanted revenge, and he also found out about hunting and wanted to save people. If it wasn't about saving people, he would only have worked on the cases related to Mary's death. But he did many cases. Emotionally, this probably was some kind of survivor's guilt, feeling guilty for not being able to rescue her, or for him not being the one who heard the baby and was in the room instead of her. This might be on top of some survivor's guilt from the war that many of the soldiers who made it back had.
Okay, stop.
Okay,
Stop. I completely agree on the survivor's guilt thing, but I think it became an addiction. That's my interpretation. And our lovely reader talks about addiction in terms of John's alcoholism a little bit further down the line. But I think maybe it started with cases surrounding Mary, but you get addicted. He gets addicted to that feeling of saving people.
right.
And like, oh, I'm there and I save the people, so I have to keep being there and saving the people. And then it becomes an addiction, because for me,
Well, it's never going to be enough, right? It's just never going to be enough. Yeah.
If he kills the right amount of monsters, it'll bring Mary back, or it'll absolve him of not being the one that went into the nursery, or not getting her out in time, or whatever. But it turning into an addiction that he needed to feed is the only reason I can make in my mind as to why, knowing that the demons wanted Sam, knowing that his kids weren't safe, needing to feed that addiction is the only thing I can think that would have made it so he didn't stay with them constantly.
There's I've been reading off and on the supernatural books that are related to the show that kind of like work in between cases or stuff. So
yeah,
there's one that I recently finished that actually does talk about, it's got a couple different perspectives and it goes across decades. And one of them is from John's perspective, like the part of the story. And spot on what you just said. He had the opportunity to stay with his boys at Bobby's for like a good couple weeks after he finished up a case. But then he got lead on something else that might have been related, maybe broadly related to Mary. But he was about, well, I'm going to go take care of this. Even though Bobby was like, well, why don't you just spend some time with your kids? They really want to see you, talk to you, and they were like, maybe I think Dean was 9 and Sam would have been 5, I think at the time. So it's all of that, like you said, that addiction of, no, I've got to go and do this. This is one more thing, one more time. I'm going to get that rush, that feeling, but it's just going to get just for a very brief period of time, right? Like it's not going to heal stuff. It's just going to, if anything, I think, rip the Band-Aid off again. And then you feel that after it's done, you just have to keep replacing that feeling with something else over and over again. Yeah.
The high never lasts, does it?
Yeah.
It never lasts. But
and I think that's what Sam and Dean were dealing with too. I think they got addicted to that. You know, that became their MO too. Like,
Oh yeah, Dean's savior complex didn't come out of
yeah,
nowhere.
yeah.
I think Sam was maybe a little bit more, just a little bit more level-headed than that. But I think Dean fed that same addiction of, I'm a good guy, I save people.
Or let's work the case. Come on, we don't have any
Yeah.
leads. Let's work the case. It's like, that's what they always go back to again and again and again. Let's work this case. Let's save somebody, like that kind of thing.
And then it kind of turns into, and you obviously we don't see it so much with John because we don't see so much of John, but it definitely turned into it with Sam, with Dean, sorry, that you start to think you're the only one that can fix this.
Yeah.
You're the only one who's got the knowledge, the skills, the whatever. Nobody else can do anything, only you.
Or I'm the one that's got to make the sacrifice. Yeah.
Yeah. So you burden yourself more and more and more to the point where you try and cripple everyone around you so nobody tries to do your thing. And you're still chasing that high. You're still feeding that addiction. So yeah, we definitely see that with Dean. We didn't really see it with John, but we didn't see that much of John. But yeah, that's the only reason that I can think. Because if someone said to me, "Hey, BT Dubs, demon child," I would be like, "This child never leaves my sight again, ever."
Yeah.
And I would just no. And me personally, I would have holed up somewhere and I would have learned every single fucking thing I could have learned on how to keep my kids safe. But I would have kept them in one spot and I would have warded the fuck out of it. You know? Bobby had a panic room. All right, maybe he didn't have a panic room when John was alive, but he had a panic room, like I would have done something like that. I would have been like a little fucking demon air raid shelter,
Yeah.
But that's what I would have done.
Yeah, and I think to counter like your thought, like Miss Audubon goes second. John didn't leave the boys with others like Bobby or Pastor Jim for a long time because he was afraid that if they stayed too long in one place, the demons might find out and get them. And I believe that he knew or at least suspected they were after Sam.
But he still kicked Sam out.
Yeah.
Out of pure temper. Sam was like, "I quit." And he was like, "You can't quit. I fired you. You fired." Like, no. So yeah, possibly he kept them moving around. He didn't leave them with other people.
Yeah.
Maybe.
But then be consistent, John.
Yeah. Pick a lane, dude. But also, I think there would come a point, even Bobby, who loved Sam and Dean to the ends of the earth, would have had a word with John and been like, "They are your children. You need to parent."
Yeah.
And it would have been easier for John to go, "Okay, pack up, we're leaving," than to face that and stop chasing his addiction.
And I think that happened a lot. Yeah. I think that it was better. I think John was more flight, right? Like that was how he dealt with things.
Yeah. If he couldn't fight it, he didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Like you can fight monsters. You can't fight your friend going, "Your kids fucking miss you, dickhead." You gotta run away from that one.
Yeah.
100%.
Okay, so now we're in third, Dean as the caretaker / parentification. Of course, leaving Dean in charge at such a young age was totally wrong, and of course, John was neglecting the boys. One might question how anyone could ever get the idea to do that. From my experience, this is my explanation for the situation. Believe me, I have actually seen such family dynamics in the real world. I believe that there are two reasons for this. First off, I believe John really literally couldn't take care of the kids after Mary's death. I believe he was really mentally too sick to do it. Maybe he was still able to provide a bit and go through some motions, like buy some food for his baby and 4-year-old. But I do not believe that he was able to really actually interact and relate to them in an adequate way. I believe, given the story before, he was not only in shock, but in a clinical depression and severe PTSD. The thing with such mental illnesses is that people tend to say, "Get your shit together. You have kids to take care of. Look at the bright side. At least you were lucky that you did not lose your kids." But the thing with a clinical depression is that these people truly cannot just control that. Am I going on, Carly?
No, you can keep going for a little while.
Okay.
I've thoughts on this one.
Okay. Those chemicals in the brain are so out of balance that they literally are not able to connect in a positive way with others. Sometimes they cannot even get out of bed. And it is not because they don't love their kids. It's also not that they don't feel like the worst parents in the world, but they really cannot do it, not without real treatment of the mental illness and support.
Okay,
And
stop.
Okay.
Stop. Okay. I'm going to be careful here because I don't want to yell.
Okay.
And I want you to remember, Ms. Audubon, that nothing I am going to say is an attack on you. Just in case I get a little bit mad. It's not an attack on you. Okay? It's not
This is
even
your
an attack.
fight. This is your fight.
This is my fight. It's not even an attack on your point of view. Okay? It's just this triggered me hugely. And I was reading it last night, and the note on the Google Doc says, be careful addressing this. You need to rein your shit in. So, as someone who has clinical depression, and I have had clinical depression for a number of years now, and I have been medicated for a number of years, excluding the brief period of time where I was the landlord to my youngest child, because you can mix some of the medication for depression and anxiety, but ideally they prefer you don't. Because the best time to come off your meds is when you're flooded with hormones from growing a child. That has no bad impact at all. It's fine. It was fine. And my son was 3 weeks old, and I had to check up with the doctor, and she was like, so how are things? And I was like, so when do I get my tablets back? And she was like, you can have them today. And I was like, thank fuck for that. I'm insane. So, a little bit of levity. I have clinical depression. Like I said, I've had it for a long time. I also have children. I see completely how those two things don't line up. Okay? And you are 100% right. People say that garbage to you. Oh, just suck it up. You've got, think of the kids. You've got your kids to take care of. Oh, it's tragic that your wife burned to death on the ceiling, but at least your kids are here. And you just kind of want that person to die in a fire. And I get it. But the thing is, I've been so depressed that I could not get out of bed. Okay? And at the time, my husband worked, and he worked long shifts at the time. And it would just be me. And some of those times it was just me with my oldest son. And some of those times it was me and both of my children. And you can't just stay in bed. You can't. Those babies, they need to be fed. You gotta get up and you gotta do the thing. And I will be the first to tell you, I'm not a perfect parent. I've made mistakes. Anybody who says they haven't is a liar. Okay? But what I would do is I would force myself out of bed and I would feed my kids. And then maybe I would lay on the sofa for the rest of the fucking day. And I would only get up to feed them. And that would be it. The baby needs his nappy changing, I'll change his nappy. The kids need food, I'll feed them. But I won't move off that sofa unless I need to. Because I physically cannot make myself do. I cannot be a person. But if I don't do it, nobody else is going to. My husband isn't there. He can't keep taking days off work because I'm insane. So it has to be done. And that is just my experience. And I'll hold my hands up. My oldest kid missed a fair few days of school because I couldn't get my shit together enough to take him because it was a really long walk and I couldn't afford public transport at the time. We never had a truant officer come round, but there was a meeting at school that it was like, hi, your child has missed quite a lot of time this term. And I was like, yeah, that's me. I'm fucking insane. And they were like, okay, is there anyone that can help with this? And I was like, nope, it's just me. And they were like, well, we really do need you to sort this out. And I was like, okay. I moved things around and I put things in place and I reached out for help and it was fine. My problem with giving John that get out of jail free card, I think, is it doesn't ring true. Because if John was truly that unwell, he would not have been well enough to haul them around the country after hunts. That's kind of, and yes, there's the addiction part of that, but they just don't marry up for me. Yes, I completely agree. He should not have been left in charge of those kids. He was very, very unwell. Shock, severe depression, PTSD, all things like that completely inhibit your ability to look after children.
Mm-hmm.
And if all he'd done was the base level, and he'd kept them in one place, and he'd fed them and clothed them and sent them to school and laid on the fucking sofa for the rest of the day, that would have been fine. If the only thing the kids had to complain about was, Dad was really absent when we were kids, that would have been fine. Like, could he have been a better parent? Yes, he could. Was he doing the best with what he had? Yes, he was. I don't think John was ever doing the best for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
That's my take on that. And I definitely think you can say John was unwell, John had PTSD, John was clinically depressed, But when you look back at the boys' kind of experience of their childhood, that was never the kind of implication that they gave.
Mm-hmm.
He was just absent. He would dump them somewhere and go.
Mm-hmm.
So that's choice,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah, maybe that also comes into play with like how his reaction was to. Like if you talk about fight or flight, maybe that was his reaction to it
Excuse me.
with the depression. So I don't know if it could have been, I mean, he was god awful, but maybe that's just like, maybe that response that he had to those things caused him to, that's how he reacted to it. So I don't know. It's very complicated. It's a complicated situation.
It absolutely is. And there's no one size fits all. There's no one explanation. John's actions don't ring true to my experience of depression. And that's just my experience of depression and mental health. That's not the be all and end all of it. That I can only look, I can only come from my background,
Right.
But from my experience, my depression sucks every bit of will I have. So for me to be like, I'm so depressed I can't look after my kids, but by fuck I can scour the newspapers to find cases and haul them all over the country and make them live in a car. That would be too hard for me.
Yeah.
But I have never been an addict, and I have never dealt with addiction. So I don't know how that balances out.
Right.
Yeah. If we still take John chasing those hunts as feeding an addiction, maybe that addiction overrides,
usurped. Yeah, definitely.
The depression's need to lay on the sofa and cry.
Yeah.
Or not lay on the sofa and cry, lay on the sofa and stare at the ceiling and think, fuck, I wish I was dead. About 65 times an hour, every hour, consistently for the whole day. So yeah, I don't know how those things balance out. But just for me, I think that's giving him too much of a get out of jail free card.
And we don't want to do that.
No, fuck you, John. Fuck you, John. Oh, he was depressed, and the thing is, depression, it is a chemical imbalance in the brain, okay? But it will shake itself out one way or another. So for some people, unfortunately, it shakes itself out to a way where they take their own life. If it doesn't, it goes the other way. You adjust. You just adjust. You go through the motions for long enough, and you just adjust. And you're numb, and you don't want to do anything. And given the choice, you will lay down, stare at the ceiling, and think, fuck, I wish I was dead. In my experience. But the body cannot stay in a permanent, I can't think of the word. the body wants to be in balance.
Mm-hmm.
It cannot stay permanently high, and it cannot stay permanently low. It will adjust.
Yeah.
So if you go into a depressive episode for a little while, especially if it's not medicated, for a little while, it will have control and you will be unable to do anything. But the body will adjust. It will find the baseline and it will go from there. And you are still depressed and you are still struggling massively, and every single little thing that goes wrong makes you go, fuck, I wish I was dead. Again, in my experience. But you just keep going, you know?
Yeah.
And sometimes the chemicals will rebalance themselves out and you will come back up and it's fine. And sometimes you stay there. And like I said, you know, people can be depressed and unmedicated for years and years and years. If you can handle it, if you know when those lows are coming and you know what you need to do to help yourself adjust, that's fine. I have friends that would be 100% classified as clinically depressed that do not treat that depression at all, that just go with the waves, you know, and sometimes it's fine and sometimes they want to die and sometimes it's fine and sometimes they want to die, you know? But I just think it's too easy. You can recover from shock. PTSD is a whole different animal. That's a whole different thing. And you 100% need actual medical. Trying to recover from PTSD on your own is like trying to walk off a compound fracture. It's not going to happen. There's bones sticking out of your leg. You're bleeding all over the place. This is not going to heal without medical intervention. So PTSD is a whole different animal. But for shock, your body will adjust to that. Depression, anxiety, your body will adjust. So I just think it's the get out of jail free card. Fuck you, John. You don't get one. No get out of jail free cards for you. No. So yeah, I feel like I handled that really well. I didn't yell.
You did.
I'm really proud.
You did. So then in my mind, I mean, I think that a lot of what Miss Audubon continues with is more about treatment, mental illness support, believing that John's treatment was alcohol, and that the guilt was still there and it did not help. So more alcohol. And then treating it like alcohol being a drug changes the person. Children of addicted parents suffer terribly because even if the parent would be she says, quote unquote, nice person normally, the drug will bring out the worst and take away any inhibition that person might have about taking the internal anger and fear and depression out on the child. So this is my explanation of why John could not take care of them. So,
again, it's a perfectly reasonable argument. Coming from my background, coming from my experiences, it's letting him off too lightly. But there's nothing wrong with the argument and the explanation. It's just no.
Yeah. Agree. Not every child would have taken over the responsibility like Dean did. Now I think these are the reasons why Dean took over. I believe that Dean actually is extremely intelligent. His paternal ancestors were men of letters, smart scholars, and his maternal family hunters. You do not survive that without being smart. Dean is portrayed as a person that thinks he is not smart, or at least thinks he is not book smart. And true, he is very impulsive and does dumb decisions if he lets his emotions take over his brain. However, so many situations show that he actually is really smart. He understands situations really quickly. He's capable of doing research like real good detective work, even without Sam. He just doesn't enjoy it as much. And he can adjust really quickly to different situations when they work cases. I believe that actually both boys were specially gifted. Actually, I believe that while he probably did not care about his own grades and schoolwork because he was taking care of Sam, he probably was the parent that made sure to promote Sam's development and his school career. I would not be surprised if he learned reading quickly to read all the books to him as a kid, did get bad grades himself, but at the same time knew all about Sam's schoolwork and helped him in school. He probably knew also how to manage money, how to count what he could still buy, and what food they could afford and whatnot. Not getting caught by CPS or catching teachers' attention for being too bad in school. He avoided all that trouble for years, and it must have been really difficult with hunting with Dad and parenting and having to put food on the table. He must have been very smart.
100%. Just stop right there. Stop right there. No, 100% agree. And I definitely think Dean would have prioritized Sammy's schooling over his own. 100%.
Now,
Slightly made myself sad
yes.
because now I'm like, oh, Dean. Again, though, again, at the end of that, hunting with his dad and parenting and having to put food on the table, that was again a choice by John. He could have just left the kids alone. He'd been doing it for years, and just let him be while he went off and did whatever he needed to do. But he didn't. As Dean got older, he started making him come with him and making him leave Sam alone.
Yeah.
And again, that's a choice that speaks to more than an addiction.
Not wanting the normalcy for the kid over, what do I need to accomplish in this situation, and who do I need to have with me?
If you liken it to a more traditional addiction of, let's say drugs, for example, an addict will move heaven, earth, and everything in between for their next fix. That's all they're focused on. Okay? And that does lead to neglect of children, but there's no addict out there that's taking their kid with them to help them take drugs. There's no kid out there that's fucking putting a belt around their kid's arm and being like, no, we have to do the drugs together. No, we have to do it together. Like, no, that's a choice. That's not a desperate act in the grip of an addiction or survivor's guilt. Because if it was survivor's guilt, why would you unless you were thinking, unless he's thinking Dean didn't deserve to make it out alive and he should die as, penance for that. There's no reason in this reasoning that marries up with the choices that John made, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. And now the thing with smart kids is that you always overestimate them. Or, well, maybe not really overestimate them, because they do tend to step up to the task and actually succeed quite often. Anyhow, I believe that Dean was really smart and that he had a really big heart. And then the story also says he did not talk for a while after the death of Mary, selected mutism. I could totally see myself telling my boy to get the baby out while I tried to save my husband, as long as I did not see fire or a monster on the way out. I hope I would not, but maybe under shock, in such a situation, knowing my kids, even at such and such years old, was extremely protective and responsible for a sister and very capable. I agree with Carly's argument that the kids should come first. However, I can also see a parent in such a situation under shock, making sure the older kid has the little one grabbed tight and telling them to get out.
Okay. Miss Autobahn, from one parent to another parent, I will have to respectfully disagree with you there, babe. And everybody parents differently, and you know your kids the best of anybody. I know my kids the best of anybody. So nothing I'm about to say is an attack on you, is an attack on your parenting or your children or anything like that. However, I could not disagree with you more in this one specific area, babe. And I'm so sorry. I was reading your email last night and I was talking to my husband about it. I was telling Sandra about this just before we started recording. I was having a conversation with my husband and I gripped him by the wrist and I was like, I love you more than I have ever loved anybody apart from the children. You are the love of my life. I love the bones of you. But if it was you or the kids, if we were in a situation where it was me or the kids and you saved me, I would be so mad with you. And he cut me off and he was like, if it was you or the kids, you'd die. I'm sorry. And I was telling Sandra and I said to him, I was like, that actually really hurt, but that's what I wanted you to say. But that, for me, and again, that's probably coming from my background, but I would just, my priority would always be to get my kids out, okay? And I think it's easy to think logically and think, I could ask the older one to take the little one out and it would be fine and then I would be free to go. But I think if you were ever in that kind of emergency situation, you'd probably find your actual response would be very different. And it may well be all grown-ups for themselves in that situation. Like I was talking to my husband about this, like I wrote down my feelings as well, and I've just, I'm the adult. I'm the adult in this situation. So whatever the emergency is, I will tell my oldest boy to hold on to his brother tight to keep them together, but I will guide them out of the situation. I will lift them, carry them, whatever needs to happen. I will guide them out of the danger until they are safe. I would never ask them to do that alone. And my kids, they're fabulous. Every parent thinks their kids are fabulous. And I have no doubt if me and my husband were to be incapacitated in some way, my oldest boy would save his brother. I've no doubt about that. I've no doubt in his ability to do that. But I just think for me, and this could be from my background of having to be very independent from a very young age. We've talked about this before. I would not want my children to feel that they had to sort themselves out. So that's just my perspective there. And again, please, it's not an attack on you. It's not an attack on your parenting. It's just two people who have different views. That's it. Please, I don't want to make this, well, you're a terrible parent and blah, 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 because it's not like that. You know your children the best. You know their strengths and their weaknesses the best, as I know mine. And I know if I were there and I said to my eldest boy, please take your brother and leave, he would freak the fuck out. He would not be able to deal with that whatsoever. He's a sensitive boy. It's the nicest possible way I can put that. He's sensitive, and he would panic, and he would freak out, and he would need guidance. So I just wouldn't put him in that situation. So that's just my take on that. And that's why I'm so angry about that situation, about John being like, get Sammy and get out. Like, fucking no! You take your children outside, sir. He's 4. And I think age comes into it as well, because you're always looking at your children at the age that they are. So my oldest boy is 10. My youngest boy is 4. Could my 10-year-old get his brother out of the house if he had to? Probably. He'd completely freak. But if it was literally get out of the house or die, he could probably accomplish that. He would not have been able to accomplish it at 4, and certainly not with a baby in his arms. It just wouldn't have happened. I'm so glad he's not in the house. He's not here today. I'm so glad. He would come. He would literally be like, Mom, do you think I'm rubbish? And I'd be like, no, baby, I just think you shouldn't have to do these things on your own.
Aw. And that's what it comes down to again and again, right? Like, that's what we keep talking about. Like, they should not have been in these situations to begin with, or given that. So, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I believe that when Mary died, John himself was clinically depressed and not capable of taking care of the kids as he should have. And then he did not have a 4-year-old whining and demanding attention in a noisy manner or acting out. The story says Dean had selective mutism, so he did not speak up at all. He was quiet and not at all demanding, actively attention to himself. His dad was not what he used to be. Mom was gone. I believe the only familiar thing was kind of Sam. And then Sam probably cried for his mom, and babies that age cry if not taken care of. So I believe John was drunk and depressed, and Dean probably just laid down in the bed with Sam to find some comfort. And when Sam fussed, he probably was smart enough to know what Sam needed and just started to take care of him.
Yeah.
And
very accurate.
We're probably very accurate. And the more and more Dean took care of things, the more John saw how capable Dean was, and the more he probably just left things to Dean. And then the more he understood about the demons being after Sam and about the monsters, the more he told him to take care and protect Sam, and Dean understood. I also believe one problem is that Dean was such an overlooked and good soul that he did not complain and not tell John when it was too much. And John was too blind to see and did not have his wife to smack him. It doesn't make it right.
Stop that. So I think this would very much be a boiling the frog kind of analogy, which apparently science has disproved. But if you're not familiar, it's if you put a frog in a pot of boiling water, it will hop out immediately. Whereas if you put a frog in a pot of cold water and slowly bring the temperature up, the frog will sit there until it dies. As I say, apparently it's been disproven. Haven't looked into it, but I have heard it's been disproven. But Dean wouldn't know that it was too much because that's all he's ever known. You think yourself, an adult, Sandra. Can you remember being 4? I can't. You know?
Yeah.
So that's all he's ever known. You know, just look after Sammy, look after Sammy, look after Sammy.
Yeah.
And as Sam grows, those expectations grow with Sam. But Dean would not have had the emotional maturity to say, this is too much. Can you look after your own fucking kid, John?
Yeah. Yeah.
So mad. So yeah, just drawing attention to that Dean probably wouldn't have known. And I don't think Dean ever knew when it was too much because his mindless look after Sam continued up until his episode that shall not be named.
Yeah.
It never stopped. It never wavered. He never took a step back and was able to go, he's a grown-ass man. He can probably be all right. You know? Ever. At any point. You know, the end of season 2. That's my job. Look after my pain in the ass little brother. Sam was a grown-ass adult at that point.
Yeah.
But it never... Yeah. So, just... Yeah.
Makes me sad. It doesn't make it right, but it's an explanation. By the way, as Jensen said at some con that Dean would probably have prostituted himself to get money for Sam. For me, that is canon. I mean, what kind of jobs would a 14-year-old get in a small town? Nobody would employ him, or when John leaves them alone for a long time, and there wasn't enough money because he thought he would be back earlier. How were they supposed to pay for the motel rooms? I would not be surprised if some sleazy motel owners took advantage of that.
Agree. I'm sad.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that we didn't imagine Jensen saying that, because we were both like, I don't know if I've just read too much fanfic, or maybe this was actually a thing.
Yeah.
But isn't that that's just sad.
Yeah.
That's all. That's just sad.
Dean would never have told John, but still, depression and mental illness or not, such things are unforgivable. However, not unexplainable. I worked in a group home with kids that worked the streets because their drug-addicted parents could not do it. And they still loved their parents, and the parents loved them, and had no idea what the kid did to get some food for the siblings. Sometimes people can be so messed up, it's just sad.
So my interject here is I have no experience with the foster system here in the UK, but there's quite a famous author here in the UK who writes about her experience as a foster parent, and it seems to be that it's only in the most extreme cases of sexual abuse that children break the attachment to their parents. A child can be beaten black and blue and starved, and they will still love and be loyal to their parent and be angry when they are taken from their parents' care and want to go back to their parent and, you know, try their best to keep their parents' secrets and things like that. So then that tracks through for Dean, is that he still is loyal to John for a long time. He's still loyal to John at the back of the show. His greatest wish is to have his parents on the dinner table. Really? We've talked about that.
Yeah.
But that rings true for Dean. But then I think Sam had Dean as a parent. So he had more of a normal, which is fucked up, a normal parent relationship. He knew what a parent was meant to be. So with that disconnect between him and John, he can see John for who he is and see how abusive he is to Dean and call it out. And that's why they butt heads, you know? And I mean, yeah, probably they are very similar. Like I said, we're not taking the Winchesters into consideration here, but he's definitely studied early Sam. There's so many similarities between them, which is obviously, you're supposed to draw those parallels, aren't you? But I think it was, yeah, they probably were similar, and they probably did butt heads because they were similar. And sometimes my kid speaks and I come out of his mouth and I'm like, why? Stop that. It's like arguing with a tiny version of myself. But I do think a lot of it probably came as well from Sam seeing what John was doing to Dean and wanting to make it stop. But being the youngest in the family, having no power, what could he do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, and Dean was never going to let John hurt Sam. He would have always stepped in and taken the punch.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's that.
So, okay. So that's my explanation for the parenting dynamics of John. So I could understand if in the Winchesters he was actually a nice and likable guy. Now, as for Mary, there is no effing explanation for why she would not embrace her grown boys and want to spend every second with them to make up for lost time, except for bad writing in the later seasons. There just isn't. What mother would not be sad for the years lost and really want to get to know their children, no matter how old, especially when they are still so adorable and kind-hearted as those two?
I said it when we did the Mary episode, and I will say it again. Mary Winchester was never meant to be a character or a mother. She was meant to be a stick to beat Dean over the head with.
Mm-hmm.
That was all she was. That was all she was when she was little. And then they brought her back to beat Dean over the head with. And I think it's funny that not just us was like, that was shit writing. What the fuck? They throw a dart at something? What the hell? So, yeah.
And then she wraps up with, I also would have loved to see another spin of or prequel. I would have wanted to see the childhood of Sam and Dean, Dad dragging them from hotel to hotel, Bobby, Pastor Jim, school, hunting. There would have been great drama in that story. Still, I am bummed because in Germany, I cannot watch the Winchesters or Big Sky or even try Walker because it's not out here. How frustrating. Well, I wish you both well. Thanks for keeping me entertained. I really miss Supernatural, and hearing you two rant about it kind of soothes my soul. And take care, Miss Audubon.
Thank you very much. Also, I will just say, NordVPN, girl. NordVPN. Get a VPN. Get a VPN and get on that stuff.
Yeah, if you need, maybe we might have to email information.
We'll email her with information. So we figured this has gone on for.
Oh my gosh, because yes, there's another one, and I'm just going to read, and I think we can comment back. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be some great stuff in the second one, and we do truly appreciate it. Yeah,
but I just like, no matter Dean's best efforts, Sam grew up emotionally stunted, purely from lack of family. Lack of interaction with anybody apart from his dad and his brother. So he never learned those lessons that most kids tend to learn, that other people have feelings and opinions and wants and needs and things. And, like kids learn that lesson and then they adapt and they become reasonable human beings.
Well, especially now when everything becomes, it's all about Sammy. I mean, he had to have taken that in somehow. Because everything was about Sam, when it wasn't about Mary, it was about Sam. It's like he was the second, after, I think all of that, he was the one that was at the tier level. It was all about Sam. So yeah.
So I just,
I'm so depressed now.
I'm sorry. I totally agree with you though. He's really selfish sometimes. So selfish. I equally could have put my hands around his neck and just been like, there are other people that exist other than you fucker. So I totally get that. But he
grows as that too. Yes, I think there's growth there for Sam, most definitely. I think when you look at that. I think older Sam, I think you see that he takes on a different role, and it's not always necessarily about him. Yeah, I think there's that there. But yeah, I guess we should wrap this one up because now I'm just looking at the time and whoa, yeah.
But if you have thoughts on Miss Audubon's thoughts or our thoughts on Miss Audubon's thoughts, reach out to us, send us an email. We will always reply. And as it seems to be, if you send us an email and you're okay with it, we will discuss it in an episode as well. So we will respond to you live, as it were. Do not take my note making on this one as read. That doesn't happen usually. Normally I just wing it. But I was reading through it yesterday and I was like, oh, I have things to say. Oh no, I need to make notes about this. So yeah, reach out to us. Let us know your thoughts. Sandra, where can they find us?
They can find us at idlingintheimpala@gmail.com. You can reach out to us on Twitter. It's idlingintheletter.D Impala. We have a Discord channel. We've got, what else do we have, Carly? We've got a Ko-fi. We'll list all those links below in case you're interested. But in Discord, we really just want to see if people pop up in there. That would be really nice. Please, somebody pop up and say hi.
Come join our Discord, guys.
Yeah. And then for reaching out to me on AO3, I am Drasna. For my fan fiction, it's DRASNA. On Twitter, I am SKylewrites. It's SKYLEWRITES. And if you want to read some of my original fiction, you can visit my website at sandrakyle.com.
You should definitely do that because there's a new one coming out this year.
Yes, there is. Yes.
So you should go and read the other ones. And then you can be like, holy shit, this is amazing. I can't wait for the new one. That's what I've done. It's like, it's not pre-ordered because there isn't anywhere for me to pre-order
Not yet.
it. But I do keep bugging her. I'm like, when is it happening? Can I read now? And she goes, no, it's with the editor. And I'm like, but can I read now?
Well, we're done with editing. So now it's just a matter of I've got to get cover design. I've got to get it formatted, which I'm going to do. And my plan is to start narrating, cross fingers, in about a week or so. So that's going to take up a large portion of my November, as we are now, it's October 22nd at the time of this recording. But yes, thank you, Carly, for plugging.
Where has 2020 gone? 2022 gone, guys? Yeah. I'm still reeling from 2020 and it's nearly 2023. What the fuck?
I know.
So yeah, read Sandra's original stuff because she's got a new book coming out. Yeah. And if you want to look me up, you can find me on AO3 and Twitter under the username Carly Karma, and that's Karlee, and then Karma as you spell it normally. It's the same profile picture in both places, in case you think, I wonder if there's more than one person out there with a weird spelt name. If it's the same profile picture, it's probably me. So I don't have any original fiction to plug because that would involve characters and plot. And I'm not great at any of those, but I do have a lot of porn on AO3. So come read.
Not true, but not true.
Well, I can't invent characters like you can. I just nick other people's characters.
You don't know until you try. It's always a possibility. Don't never say never. Never say never.
Never say never. But as it stands at the moment, come read my porn on AO3. So we would like to say
it's really good porn.
It is good porn. I'm not even going to be modest about that. It is good porn. So for now, we will say thank you very much for joining us in the back seat, and we will see you next time. Bye, guys.
Bye.